1988 was an interesting year in history. The Soviet-Afghanistan conflict ended, Photoshop launched, and it was the year that hit films Die Hard, Beetlejuice, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit released to critical acclaim. In the world of comics themselves, we saw some great things. The Killing Joke was released for DC, and Venom made his full debut in Amazing Spider-Man issue 300. But in the indie scene, a new scene was brewing, one that would become an icon of punk culture. But first, some backstory. When writer Alan Martin met artist Jamie Hewlett in the mid-80s at Northbrook College, formerly West Sussex College, there were seemingly just two creatives, Martin, an aspiring writer, and Hewlett, an illustrator. The two formed a friendship, and with the help of mutual friend and fellow artist Philip Bond, the trio would come together to make Adam Tan, a self-published fan-made magazine, and while it's not any kind of financial success, Adam Tan does get the trio noticed by an important individual, by the name of Brett Ewins. Now, why is Ewins so important? Well, he and Steve Dillon are both working on a magazine designed to feature both articles and comic strips, aimed at an adult demographic. The name? Deadline. It's here where the trio are hired, and whilst Bond would go on to do a handful of works, Martin and Hewlett decided to stick together and use an idea that spawned whilst creating Adam Tan. And in October 1988, Deadline would publish Tank Girl, an Australian bounty hunter who's crass, crude, and an alcoholic. Oh, and she drives a tank, which she also lives in. For this video, I'm borrowing my girlfriend's copy of Tank Girl's first run, which went from 1988 to 1995, and originally released in black and white, part of the monthly release of Deadline magazine, until the magazine went out of print. For the 30th anniversary, however, in 2018, the first book of the classics was reprinted in color, containing all Tank Girl material from 1988 to 1990, with two more books being released in the subsequent years. This would lead to the original stories getting a package release in the Color Classics trilogy, which was released in 2022 and is what I'm using for today's video. The first book, which is mentioned previously, covers Tank Girl's releases in 88 to 90, and is very simple in its execution. Put plainly, the first few stories don't really cover an overarching plot, favoring a more adventure of the week method of storytelling. I believe this is due to its publication method, being a small story in a magazine rather than your standard comic run. It's here where we're introduced to both Tank Girl's setting and the main cast of colorful characters, starting with the titular Tank Girl, her mutant kangaroo boyfriend Booga, who is so delicious. Ooh. Stevie, Tank Girl's ex-boyfriend who is deeply connected to Aboriginal culture, and rounding out the cast is recurring side characters Jet Girl and Sub Girl. The comics were initially set in post-apocalyptic Australia, but that seems to be less prevalent as the story progresses. The first story shows that TG is a tank driver for the military, but this is quickly uprooted when she's unable to make a delivery on time, outlawing her to the military. This leads TG to become a renegade, driving around and getting into all sorts of wacky zany adventures. It's even believed by the Aboriginal people that TG is a reincarnation of Tankia, a spirit they called forth to fight off greedy white landowners. And while this is all established in this first book of the collection, the plot, as I said, is nonsensical. But I do believe that is by design, as the writing as well as the art reflect this quite well in my opinion. Starting with the art, it's clearly influenced by the art of the punk scene of the 80s and early 90s. It's not messy, but out of control and absurdist, much like the writing, with there being no real serious stakes and the adventures are ridiculous, but fun. Moving on quickly to the next entry of the collection, Book 2 covers everything from 1990 to 1993, and much like the first book, this follows the same formula. Absurd adventures, wacky hijinks. The writing gets more meta, with TG interacting with Martin and Hewlett themselves, using the fact they're the writer and artist to change the events. This happens a few times, most notably in the story where TG seeks out the Fountain of Youth to save her sick Nan, in which she takes Martin's writing pad and due to being woozy from blood loss, she misspells public and ends up in artist Philip Bond's pubes. Book 2 also contains the most experimental art of the initial run, where Hewlett is clearly having fun. Just look at some of these pages. I mean, they're just ridiculous with how varied they are. I will say, Hewlett's art really speaks to me in this book. I'm a massive fan of just how uncanny his art can look at times. It's really interesting. The meta writing is in full force towards the end of the book, where Martin and Hewlett take over the book entirely for a brief period, where they touch on their experience in creating the series, as well as how they've handled the success and their difficulties with it, and just how thankful they are for the fans making Tank Girl such a success. Moving on to the third and final book of the collection, which contains all material from 1993 to the end of the run in 1995, And right out the gate, I want to say, art is intriguing in how much it contrasts compared to the last book's wide variety. The art is more consistent and stabilized. The art varies, but not to the same extent as the previous book. The writing also doesn't get as meta as the previous book, with Martin and Hewlett not showing up really at all in these stories here. Book 3 has more of what Book 1 had, wacky, zany adventures. Not to say that that's a bad thing. I think out of all 3 books, the first one is my favorite, and to the third book's credit, it did some fun stuff, giving both Sub-Girl and Jet Girl one-off stories, as well as a silly spin-off for the character of Booga. Unfortunately, 1995 would be the last year Deadline magazine published Tank Girl, as the magazine went out of business. But not all would be lost, as in 1995, Tank Girl was about to make her mark on the silver screens of Hollywood. Tank Girl herself would be portrayed by Lori Petty, and the film was being helmed by Rachel Talalay, who was gifted a copy of Tank Girl and decided to try and make a film about it. Signing a contract with MGM Production, filming began in June 1994 and finished the following September. Though filming went well, Martin, Hewlett, and Rachel Talalay were all disappointed at how much the studio would interfere. They refused to incorporate the creators' jokes and made them constantly rewrite the script to the point that the duo actually don't like to talk about the time they worked on this movie. For Rachel, the studio wouldn't let her film certain scenes, hence why the film has a few animated sections.
Yes! What do you say we blow this joint? Ruin the surprise!
All the studio mingling ended up just being disastrous, as the film was unfortunately both a critical and box office flop, gaining not only harsh reviews from critics, but some of the fandom even turned on it, calling the once punk icon a sellout. The movie itself is an original story, changing the setting and origins for a fresh audience. Tank Girl's personality was altered to be more of a punk badass action heroine, a stark contrast to the self-interest motivated Tank Girl of the comics. Despite this, though, in 1996, Alan Martin and Jamie Hewlett would leave Tank Girl for a while, after trying to launch a second series called The 16s, which didn't go anywhere. Hewlett would go on to join musician Damon Albarn to form a band by the name of Gorillaz. You know, those Gorillaz. You can even see Hewlett's art and how it gets closer to the Gorillaz signature style over time. Alan Martin would move on after writing Tank Girl Visions of Booga with art by Rufus Dayglow. Martin would pursue other creative outlets, such as joining hippie communes for a while, as well as playing in various bands. Now, while Martin and Hewlett were gone, Tank Girl herself was far from it. 1996 also saw the release of Tank Girl Apocalypse, written by Alan Grant and art by Andy Pritchett respectively. Alan Martin would return as the main writer for Tank Girl with artist Ashley Wood in 2007 for IDW Comics with Tank Girl The Gifting. Following that, Tank Girl has had steady releases ever since, and Martin has teamed up with artist Brett Parsons, and they've been the duo behind the book ever since. In other media, it was announced in 2019 that actress Margot Robbie with her production company Lucky Chap had secured the rights for a reboot film, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, production was halted and there's been no new news as of late. Tank Girl is such an interesting comic. I had really no idea about it until my girlfriend had mentioned it to me. Like, I'd heard of the movie, but I had no idea it was really a comic book beforehand. And then she asked for them for her birthday, I got them for her, and then she asked if I wanted to make a video on it, and I was curious, so that's what happened. She wants them back. I can't give them to her, I'm not finished with them yet.
Hey babe, can I have my Tank Girl comics back?
No!
Are you sure you're not going to give me my Tank Girl comics back?
I'm not finished with them yet.
What about now?
Okay, you can have them back.
That's what I thought.
That's Tank Girl. Stay safe, Jesus Christ. Stay safe, stay true, stay you. I've been your host of Comic Wraith. I'll catch you in the next one. Later.